Hey, what's going on, beautiful jellyfish? It's Tracy. I am so excited to be doing this video for you guys today. This is for my fellow control players. This is a video on control mirrors, which honestly are pretty tough, I would say. A lot of people, I think, it's really difficult to determine like what to fight over and stuff like that. And like, to be honest, it's kind of one of those things where it's like more of a learning curve. Like it's more of a like scenario based situation that it's kind of more easy to like determine, to be like, okay, cool, I learned like that interaction like right there. But these are just a couple of tips that I picked up on of just playing control mirrors. Now, when I say that, I'm just saying in modern sense. I play modern, so I'm talking about this. I'm sure this can apply to other formats as well. But I'm talking about, like, I pulled out the popular ones. Grixis, Blue White, Jeskai, and I guess like Blue Moon is like, that's a control deck, so I like, threw it on there as well. But here is kind of the first point that I think people need to realize, is that you are not playing the same list. Even if you are literally both playing blue-white control, you're not playing the same list. And I think that is really sweet. Like, I think that's really awesome when you look at like some decks that have such a set deck list. And like control, what's really sweet about that is you have so many open slots, because like something I noticed is a lot of blue mages are like, okay, this is what I think is the best. This is how I'm going to do things. And these are the cards that I personally think are most efficient, like counter spells. Counter spells are so, like, that to me is one of the most dependent things on the person. Like, I have counter spells that I absolutely love that like other people don't. Like, for instance, I play Grixis Control in Modern, and I really like Counter Squall, which honestly, if you're playing this color combination, you just need to be playing Counter Squall. But I love this counter spell. I also really love Counter Flux. This card really throws a lot of people off. By the way, this card's really good in the control mirror. If you're a Jeskai player, I would highly recommend throwing this card in your sideboard. If not your main board. I really like this card a lot. The last ability, the overload ability, I don't think that's ever been relevant for me, but the fact that it can't be countered is really important. And the double blue red is like really not hard to get. Like, you're playing so many blue sources in literally whatever list, and just one red source is really not asking for a lot, because if you're playing Jeskai, you're gonna have a red source. Like, you don't run a ton of red, but you do have enough, so one is like not asking for a lot. But anyways, so you're not playing the same list. Control has so much variation. There are a lot of staples, like you're gonna see, but even so, I was actually reading, and I'll link it in the down bar below. Jim Davis wrote a really good article on blue-white control, and you know, he shared like, I think a couple of lists I want to say in there. There was one list I got first place in, I don't even remember what it was. It wasn't like an open or in something. I don't know what the tournament was, but this some guy got first place with it. And it only ran like one Snapcaster mage. Now for me, a Snapcaster is an auto like 4 in everything. I really disagree with that. Like, even if there's a lot of graveyard hate going around, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, Snapcaster is just an ambush viper, and like a lot of times that is one of the, like, he does a really good job at that, and I find myself, I don't want to say doing it a lot, but I find myself doing it like more than a lot of people would think. So something to keep in mind, I would say, with a control mirror is whose late game is better. So one of my friends, Steven, he's one of my control buddies, and he is on Jeskai right now, and I'm on Grixis. And so we were in a conversation of like how our matchup fares, basically, because we're in different color combinations. And I was like, I think your late game is better than mine, to be honest. My late game is great against a lot of like other decks, because I run Keranos in my main board, and he is one of my win conditions. And things like Snapcaster, Mage plus Lightning Bolts are, you know, pretty much how I like win the game. It's really not, honestly, I don't find myself killing people with Creeping Tar Pit a lot. I think that's kind of more of the blue, like I only run 2 copies, and I really just don't find myself drawing it a lot, and like I don't really find myself killing people. Like, so many people are running Land Disruption right now that it's just like, you know, it's not that it's not good, it's still good to have. Creeping Tar Pit's still a great card. It's just like I don't find myself drawing it a lot, and you know, it just dies to like everything. Anyways, so the late game is better in his Jeskai build. Now, the blue-white or Jeskai decks are running really sweet things. They're running like Elspeth Sun's Champion, which is amazing. amazing. And goodness knows, when I have my blue-white / Jeskai deck, I am going to be running Elspeth Enchant. That's one of my staple cards. They run a lot of really, really good late game things where I think the Grixis plan is just not as deep, I would say, in the late game. Like, I think their draws are just like better than yours, pretty much. I mentioned Keranos briefly. If you're someone who is looking for another sideboard card and you play Jeskai or Grixis Control, I would highly recommend Keranos. A lot of people think that it's kind of weird. Like, Control's in this really weird spot right now, as I feel like it usually is in Modern, where it's like, oh, well, like, Keranos is 5 mana. And so, like, again, I think people, like, see that and they're like, you cast him on turn 5. Please stop. You really usually do not cast Keranos on turn 5. You cast him in late stages of the game where you have the board locked. You have the board under control, literally just that. And you play Keranos and you're like, cool, you're not going to be able to answer this card. There are very few cards in Modern that can viably answer this card. Just to name a couple, we have things like Detention Sphere, which you will see things like blue-white running, which is very important to note. Their counter spells, very important. They're going to counter that, and that is something that they need to be countering. Another thing that I feel like, and this actually ties into my last point a little bit about like being patient, but one thing that I typically like will see in like, say I'm the control player and I'm playing against an aggro player. I'm gonna like fire my things like my lightning bolts off more aggressively in terms of their creatures. I'm gonna target their creatures more with that. However, in a control mirror, bolting a Snapcaster is not great. I'm a little sick right now if there's some difference in my voice. But anyways, I'm more likely to cast a lightning bolt on their creature versus their face if I'm playing against an aggressive deck. However, in a control mirror, I have other ways of dealing with your creatures like Fatal Push that I'm like, or Terminate, that I'm like, cool, I can deal with your dudes. I'd rather have that lightning bolt go upstairs. So I think it's kind of like at some points in the game, you're just gonna like have like, I'm not gonna do anything, but I'm just gonna like end of your turn lightning bolt you. And like that is something that I will see a lot in things like control mirrors, like not hoarding your like these removal-esque spells, because you have other removal spells pretty much, and it's like if you're running things like lightning bolt, you want that damage to be going like upstairs versus like other creatures. Other times where you're gonna like lightning bolt a mage, absolutely, and that definitely happens, but I think it's like less frequently because you have those other removal spells. Okay, this next point is hella important. Okay, what are you fighting over? Now, if your opponent is just like, I'm gonna lightning bolt you, but you're not at 3, I don't really know how much you care about that. Are you really gonna like counter a lightning bolt? Doesn't usually seem like the best thing to do. Moral of the story is what you're fighting over has to be worth it. It has to be something really threatening, because typically what will happen is you fight over card X, right? And it's at the end of your turn. You then tap out because you're using all of these resources, you're using all of your counter spells and things like that. And then you tap out to fight over whatever, you win and you don't, it doesn't really matter. Then they're free and they've got a ton of open mana that they're gonna do something with. Now, and I'm gonna segue into this, the concept of a blue mage of never tapping out. Oh my god, I can never tap out, but like here's the deal. And funny, in that Jim Davis article, actually, he mentioned Sphinx's Revelation and saying how a lot of people are actually, like, not using that card. They're using Glimmer of Genius instead, which that card's awesome. I don't really know how I feel about it. It definitely gave me perspective, though, in maybe not running 2 Sphinx's Rev. I think that's, like, really greedy. And you also run Snapcaster, so, like, if you ever need to, you can snap Sphinx's Rev, which just seems, like, amazing. But also, too, like, at that point, if you cast a Sphinx's Rev, you draw in so many resources that you're, like, you've probably just killed them. So I think the whole idea of like, oh, I can't tap out, it's like there are definitely going to be instances where like you are going to need to tap out, and I think that is like totally viable. So kind of like, so when I mentioned earlier about how like people look at Keranos and they're like, oh my god, it's like 5 mana, you cast it on turn 5, lol, no. A lot of people were like, when Jace came out, they were like, oh, he's just a 4 mana sorcery and you cast him on turn 4. And I'm like, you literally could not be more wrong. Please, you don't know what you're talking about. The thing is though, is in a control mirror, if they've tapped out for some reason on their turn 3, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know. Maybe they're mana screwed and they have a tap land. Maybe they have like a Celestial Colonnade and then they like Serum Vision and they have 1 mana open, so you're not like super worried about like a Spell Pierce or something. You're like, okay, cool, I'm gonna like jam Jace pretty much. Again, a lot of people have that thing of like, oh, like I can realistically play Jace on turn 4. And like the thing is like you wanna carefully time that, because like you want to make sure that you can successfully cast cards. But like the thing is in that instance, you tap out for Jace, you don't have anything else going on. So there's a lot of like bait spells that you'll see in like control mirrors where like someone will play something and it's like, cool, are you gonna counter it? No. Okay, cool. Or yes, you're gonna counter it, and now I'm free to cast my way more threatening spell. That was my bait spell, just to see like, do you have a counter, and or do you think that the spell is threatening enough, or do you even have like another way basically of dealing with it, which is really important to note. One of the last points is which I feel like is very common is people sideboarding out a lot of their spot removal, because it is not really good in control mirrors. Do you really want to Path to Exile Snapcaster Mage? Not really. That's not quite the place that you want to be in. However, something I would really note is a really important card I would say in a lot of control sideboards is a card like Vendilion Click, and your opponent's probably gonna bring something like that in against you because it's really good, and it's also like a 3/1 flyer, which is amazing. And again, they don't really want to waste like a lightning bolt killing that just kind of sucks. So I think a lot of people just like boom sideboard out like a lot of the removal, which I do agree with, and bringing in something like counter spells are just better. But honestly, I wouldn't side out like every single card of removal, because you definitely do want it. It's very important. The last point that I would really say in control mirrors is to still be patient. I think that's just one of the most important things in control in general, is like, it is not for people who aren't patient. You have to be like, okay, like, you know, I'm just gonna jam like 3 lightning bolts at your face end of turn. And it's like, okay, sweet, but you may need those to like kill creatures, like, you know, at some point. Like, I think some people are a little too like aggressive about it, and it's just like, you know, there are terms where you literally don't do anything, and this was like one of the best advice. It was like a JD and Clown Parents article, and it was like how sometimes literally doing nothing is the right move. And I think that is really important, like, and I think especially too, like, a lot of people have it in them, especially if they're going from like, say, playing an aggro, like you're someone who typically plays an aggro, and then you go from that to control. I think it's like really kind of a weird transition to be like, wow, I'm like not casting anything, you know what I mean? But there are times where it's right to just sit pretty and like literally just not do anything, because you need to keep that counter spell or whatever, or that removal spell for like something else pretty much. I didn't actually even write this down, but to be honest, I just thought of it, and I think it's really important. I was playing a game with my friend Steven, who, like I said, is on Jeskai Control, and we were playing, and this is honestly, I feel like a lot of people misplay so much against me when I'm playing Grixis Control against my creatures, because they're not too sure like what creature suite I'm doing, and I run very few creatures, obviously. And so I was playing against Steven, and like I kept attacking him with the Snapcaster Mage. And so it was like, I knew he had like a Path to Exile in his hand because I like thought seized him or something like that. And so like he wasn't firing this path off, and he got to such a low life total that it was like, ugh. And so like from his perspective, I guess he was like waiting on something like a Tasigur. This is a huge misplay, because a lot, like, you want to deal with threats like immediately. You want to make sure that the board is pretty much clear where there's really not like threats on it. And he got himself to a really low life total and ended up dying because of the Snapcaster Mage. He ended up pathing it, but it was too late. I had enough things like lightning bolts to like deal with his life total that it just like didn't matter. So like I think a lot of people are like, oh my god, like you're gonna kill me with Tasigur, and I'm like, I have other ways of killing you. Like I only run 1 Tasigur at this point. I actually was running 2 and I ended up cutting 1. It's a little slow and a little clunky, I would say. There were times where I'd have 2 in my hand and it was just really awkward. And you know what, you run Culligan's command, so you can just get it back if he dies. Like, you don't really care that much. And again, you have other ways of winning the game, so like it's not a huge deal if they do end up killing it. So yeah, I just like, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, I'm saving this path for something better, and it's like, I mean, like, I guess. I mean, is it great to pat the Snapcaster? No, but, like, that was the right move, and he should have done it earlier. Ended up losing because of it. So, I think it's a matter of, like, dealing with these types of threats as they kind of come. Another point that I forgot to mention, which was a really, really important thing with what are you fighting over, pretty much, like, things to pick and choose. This story that I was watching Control Mirror. It was Kevin Jones versus I don't remember who, and Kevin Jones resolved on like turn 4 secure the wastes, and he made like 3 dudes at like the end of his opponent's turn. His opponent had a counter spell in his hand, and he didn't fire it off, which I was really confused about. I was kind of trying to think of it from his perspective. It was the end of that person's turn. So Kevin Jones was tapped out. And so maybe that person thought, if I counter this, I don't have another counter spell. And like, I can deal with these threats later on. And so he didn't counter it. And maybe he also thought that like Kevin would untap and like jam a Jace. And if he didn't have another counter spell, like he was just dealing with like Jace, which is probably just more threatening than like 3 secure the waste tokens, because like Jace is gonna just like brainstorm and draw him so many cards and get him so much card advantage that it's just gonna like, okay, like I'm just gonna draw all these cards that are just gonna like kill you pretty much. So anyways, in my opinion, that opponent literally just misplayed. He ended up dying because of the secure the waste token. He didn't draw anything to deal with those tokens, and he died. So I think it's really important, and with that kind of same point is like there are removal spells that it really sucks to cast, like a Path to Exile on a 1/1 token, but like if you don't have other means of dealing with them, if you can't draw another answer, like that is the right move. The creatures are you really holding that out for versus like a 1/1 token or something like that. Like a Snapcaster Mage, like still not really great, you know what I mean? Yeah, so that is pretty much it, guys. That is it on just a couple of tips that I gathered to help with the Control Mirror. I hope my fellow Control Mages found this video helpful, and I will see you guys later. Bye!